You're watching Alive and Well. I'm your hostess, Ann Bratsburg. And this afternoon I am speaking with Leamon Jones, who is the Director of Consumer Services for the Michigan Commission for the Blind. And as I said when we opened the program, that they have been very instrumental in the growth of DSE-TV. And in fact, it's because of them that we have the website in which our programs are airing on. And in fact, I'm sure many of you are watching it online right now. So, Leamon, before the break, we were talking about you graduating and going into rehabilitation, right? Counseling?
Correct. Mm-hmm.
And what was the progress there to the Commission for the Blind? How did that happen?
Well, as I was in my last year of grad school work, I was, sending out resumes, and so at that point I said, hey, I need a job. I go wherever it is. I'd done some work at mental hospitals and those kinds of things, and so I said, well, wherever the first opportunity comes, I'm gone, right? So, and again, like I said, I sent resumes all over. I had some interest in New York and some interest in several other states, Connecticut, Denver, Colorado. But Michigan was the first one to call, so I said, okay, I'm gone. I'm off. So here I am.
And you're married. Now tell me how that happened. I mean, when did that come about?
Well, I'd been working here for about 2 years, and I met my wife. It's kind of interesting how we met, in that at that particular time, my wife was working as a social worker with the state, and somehow or another we ended up with a mutual client. So from that standpoint, I had to make contact with them and talk with them about services. In fact, she had referred that particular person to our agency for services, and they were receiving services from, at that time it was called Social Services, and now it's Department of Human Services. And so from that, through those communications and talking about the client, and I found out that she was single, So I said,
neat.
oh, okay, well. So we talked, and we, began to talking about various kinds of activities and different things like that. And so that's kind of how we got started talking, and from that,
cool.
That's where we are, yeah.
And do you have children?
Two daughters.
Mm-hmm.
One's here in Michigan that lives in wherever that is, West Bloomfield or something like that, West Bloomfield, and my other daughter lives in Nashville, Tennessee.
Really? And what careers have they chosen?
My oldest daughter is an engineer at Ford, and my other daughter is IT and the metropolitan government in Nashville.
Good career choices. Mm-hmm. Very good career choices. Well, that's excellent. And tell me a little bit. Obviously, you lost your sight when you were just in junior high school, and technology has really evolved. Give me some examples of how things used to be like when you were in school for the blind. I mean, how did you guys do it? Obviously, now they've got computers. I don't think anybody would ever even think of a slate and stylus now, the kids growing up. But did you guys use those back then? Or was it the Brailler, or how did it work?
Yes, it was slate and stylus and Brailles at that particular time. So, those laid on the board, and kind of like it wasn't a clipboard, but similar to that. You clip the paper at the top and you slide the bar down like that. And then, of course, they had the Braille writers. The Perkin Braille writers were around at that particular time as well. And that was probably the advanced technology. Well, it was technology at that time, and as time progressed, then the computers became more operative for persons with vision impaired. There were reading machines as well.
Kurzweil?
Pardon me, the Kurzweil reading machine was one, and it was huge.
Huge, I remember seeing it back in the 70s.
Yeah, big thing, yes.
Yeah.
and you had to get the paper correctly and all of those kinds of things. So, but that was a big start. That was a big job for a person because that was having the ability to have access to printed material. And then, of course, development of software, screen reading software, and that became more perfected. So we have various programs now, screen reading programs. So that really has been the avenue that has begun to really level the playing field for persons who are blind and visually impaired. Access to printed material.
How did you deal with going from a school where things would be adapted because they're obviously dealing with predominantly visually impaired and blind kids, and then going into a college where it's not accessible? How did you manage to, like, when they would write notes on the board, or say you had to look up something in an encyclopedia, or how did you get past that stuff?
Well, it was interesting because in college, that's when you needed to really have the skills, and it's really important for persons who are blind and visually impaired to have the independent living skills, skills of blindness as we call them, because you need to have some means of communication, written communications as well as oral communication, and the ability to get around, mobility skills. So I use my slate and stylus at the time to take notes. Now, and oftentimes I would, talk with the professor prior to class and ask them if they don't mind repeating what they're writing on the board so that I can take the notes. Right? Sometimes, they would forget, and so you'd have to kind of remind them from time to time. But that's how I did. Some individuals use tape recorders. I didn't. I used a tape recorder for recorded materials, reading books and periodicals and those kinds of things. You use a reader from time to time to read, to do research in the library and those things, because there weren't, you didn't have the computers to do those kinds of things back then, so you had to have a live reader for those things. Were
most of the professors, did they work with you? Were they amenable, or did they give you trouble?
Most of them, I didn't have any that really gave me any trouble. They were willing to, do that. What would happen, as I said, from time to time, they really get involved in their lecture, and they'd forget, They'd been talking and turn around, write something on the board, and then talk some more, and you said, just have to ask and remind them. Yeah. So, once you kind of got used to them and they got used to you, they were receptive. Sometimes they would tell you that I will, give you my notes and let you have my notes once I get through with the lecture, something like that.
Did you face, over the course of your career, have you faced much discrimination? I really haven't, and yet I've heard horror stories from other people who have. Did you personally face much? Do you think it's getting better? Was it different when you were growing up?
I'm sure that, it's always the attitude that the perception of the general public, what is it that a blind person can do? Do we have to hire two people, have two people to do one's job? Those perceptions, and yet they were there then and somewhat still there now. I think is that the blind person, visually impaired, they must demonstrate that they have the abilities, the skills and ability to perform a task, to do the job, and the core functions of the job, that you don't have to have two people to do one job. So yes. And I'm sure that, we all have probably had some stories where we were, or we are aware that we were discriminated in some sense. But really, in all senses, I mean, whether it's race, whether it's belief, whether it's, whether you're heavy or too tall or whatever, there's always going to be somebody who's going to do. Yes.
And the thing I've learned is that if you take the initiative, when you go into a situation that's maybe unfamiliar, or they're unfamiliar with you, you don't go in and say, gee, I don't know how I'm going to do that. You have to go in with telling them how it can be done, so that you allay any fears they might have. And then I think it jumps that hurdle a little bit better. It definitely does. I can recall once I was, I'd gone on an interview, and I won't name the company, but the guy said, well, we really had the skills,
and you can do this. You've shown me how you can do this. It was a sales job, right? And so you're showing me how to do this, how you can do this, and I have confidence. But you know what? Once you really get to doing this and you find another job, you'll find something else because you're overqualified. You know how you get that overqualified space, be saying, you're sitting there saying, oh yeah, but just give me the job. I'll show you.
Yeah, exactly.
But, yeah, you get that. But, you just have to keep going because where that one person may say no or have some reasons why they feel, you may not be the best person or the qualified person, there's someone else down the road further that will open the door. So you have to keep going until you find that door.
I'd like to talk to you a little bit more about what some of your perceptions are in regards to being visually impaired and some of the ways, not just technology, but attitudes, the way things are changing, and also talk a little bit about what you like to do in your free time. So,
okay.
I am Ann Bratsburg. This is Leamon Jones, Director of Consumer Services for Michigan Commission for the Blind. You are watching Alive and Well, and we'll be back in just a moment.